Hello, welcome to Man in High Castle Season 3 review. In this installment we review Episode 7, Excess Animus. And the question we ponder today is, when you need shelter from the storm, who will give it? In this episode we saw that Juliana was finally reunited with Frank and Ed. But the question that hangs over them now is, how long will this respite last? How safe are they from the coming storm? This episode, Excess Animus, received an IMDb score of 8.0, and my general impression of the episode is it's a weaker episode. I wasn't so happy with some of the plot contrivances that occur in the episode, and that really kind of turned me off, and I felt that one of the recurring problems of the Grand Palace, which I'll go into later, it was one of the biggest reasons why the plot contrivances felt so heavy. But before going into that, let's get into some of the general information about the episode. It was directed by Steph Green. He's also, or she, could be a she, Stephanie, was a director for The Americans and the upcoming series The Watchmen. In fact, I think it is a woman. The writer was Dre Ryan, who's also worked on Colony and The Messengers. And the director of photography, James Hawkinson, he's already done a few of the episodes we reviewed, and I don't think he has any more this season. He's also worked on Hannibal and Community. And before we get into comments about acting, etc., let's again, as always, do the plot summary, which comes courtesy of Amazon. Juliana embarks on a mission to stop the Nazis, a mission that reunites her with old friends. Nicole and Thelma grow closer, despite the risks. Smith learns more about the Nazis' efforts into alt-world travel. Kido demands Tagomi come clean about the films and his ability to travel. Kido coaxes crucial intelligence from children. I wasn't planning on commenting on it, but reading this, it just reminded me that scene between Kido and Tagomi was a really well done scene. Nice dark lighting, and then the acting was very deliberate and considered between the two actors. So shout out to that before we move on to other things. There are two sequences I would like to talk about. The first is the bad. We'll do the bad and then the good. The bad is not so much a particular scene or sequence within the episode, but the direction a character has taken. And this, for me, has been a problem throughout the whole season 3, and that's children. And the showrunner has a certain idea of where he wants to take the character, and in order to do that, there have been very heavy moves made to get the character to go from point A to point B. I'm going to lay out where the direction this character has taken, step by step, at least the steps that I have a problem with, the significant ones. So first, to get children to the point where he is being interrogated by Kido at the end of episode 7, he is robbed in the neutral zone by a motorcycle gang. He is cheated by the Japanese Pacific States government through confiscation by having his home and his business taken away from him. He is cheated by the Yakuza after spending a night with the prostitute. Then he's cheated again by the current inhabitant of his former home when she calls the police to arrest him for trespassing, theft, and assault. So let's see, robbed in neutral zone, cheated by the Japanese Pacific States government, cheated by the Yakuza, cheated by the inhabitant of his house. None of those are from his character. They're not directed from actions the character took. They're actions taken against the character by misfortune, and it's weaker. Anything that doesn't come from actions of the character weakly defines the character, makes the character passive. I feel that there could have been a much better approach taken to all of that. That's the bad. For the good. And I really enjoyed the scene between Frank, Juliana, and Ed. You heard me mention it before. And before I get into the actual scene itself, I do want to take stock of two very significant lines that both characters say in the episode. First, when Juliana is screening the film from The Man in the High Castle to I can't remember her name. She's the leader of Sabra. She says the film is proof there are other possibilities. Reality is not preordained. And then, like 10 minutes later, Frank utters this line: everything happens for a reason. As much as it was nice to see those two characters reach a new rapport, and Frank saying the lines, "I trust you," because for him to say those lines, it implied there had been a lot of development in his character. They see the world in 180 degrees differently. Completely opposite. Everything happens for a reason. It's proof there are other possibilities. Reality is not preordained. Reality is preordained. Reality is not preordained. It looked like at the end of the episode that Juliana would be leaving Sabra, and she offered for him to go with her, and he declined her offer. If he had decided to go with her, maybe he does. I haven't seen episode 8. That difference in worldview is significant. It says there will be a greater conflict later on. You can't, when it comes to significant events, life and death events, you can't have so great a difference in philosophy and expect that it's not going to lead to conflict. So I wanted to point that out. But now let's get to the scene between Frank, Ed, and taking me a second here. Frank, Ed, and Juliana. Thank you. Thank you, notes. In case you hadn't seen before, let's see if I can get this focused. You may have seen me glimpse down to the bottom, down to my right. It's because I write down notes. Sometimes they're very detailed with word by word script of what what to say, especially in the opening, the intro. But a lot of the other parts are just scratch notes, just to prompt me to be able to speak. So that saved me just now. Thank you, notes. So let's get to the scene. Like I said, first let's begin with the cinematography. Really nice dark light photography. Good for creating that intimate. Oops. I don't want to get the camera or the clock in the shot. I tell you, the arrangement of my apartment is really not good for shooting. I've had to tweak it to get to a place where I feel like the aesthetics of the room would win over the non-aesthetics, the ugliness of the room, the functionality of the room. And here we're kind of losing. But okay, so good, it's got it. You can see the three of them. I believe it's the conference hall, the opposite end, the end we haven't seen before. The hall where Sabra voted on whether Frank should leave or stay. I believe it's the same locale. And while we're here, let's go and take a look. There's Frank. Oh yeah, so before getting to that, in the scene, it's been a season and a half since these characters have been together. And that carries a lot of weight within the viewer, the expectation of when would they reunite, what would that union, the reuniting, be like? And now that they have reunited, there is an inherent tension within the viewer of what exactly is going to occur between these characters. And what I think, to the credit of the writing, which I've been very, very hard on, in this installment, rather than overselling it, rather than indicating the emotions that are going on in the characters, they undersell it and they trust the actors to deliver these lines, these mundane lines, with the weight of the emotion that the scene already has. Let's get to the middle here. So we get them talking about the bar mitzvah, which we saw in episode number 6. 30 seconds. I counted how long the scene lasted. 30 seconds of dialogue on the bar mitzvah. We should be bored. It's redundant. We've seen it before. But it's not what's being said. It's what's not being said. Remember, the actors are going to carry the emotion of the scene. You leave it to them. And when people meet after a long time, they don't say the most significant thing. Usually, they begin with the insignificant thing. They want to share the small details of their life. It's the second time, by the way, that bar mitzvah was mentioned within the episode. Lila, the character I forgot before, talks about it with, I can't remember his name, the schlub, the schlub that's friends with Frank from San Francisco. And I really shouldn't bother with finding it. I won't. I won't. My setup is not, I've got my Kindle here, and I've got my computer here. If I want to look up the cast details, I need to grab the Kindle here and then leave the pictures I'm going to show you. Or I can go over to the computer over here and then mess around with that while this is filming. So we'll just forget it. My OCD is kicking in. I'm desperately trying to find his name, the character's name. You know, I could just put, no, I don't have enough skills where I could put a little text box with his name. I got it. No, I didn't. Michael Gaston. Yeah, Mark Sampson, Michael Gaston. There we go. Phew. I hope that was worth it for you. So that's the second time the bar mitzvah has been mentioned. And in the episode, we see that Nicole talks about Joe Blake's death. I like the way that in this show, the actions have weight. They have consequence. They stay with the characters. And in the wrong hands, that could be a little bit annoying to see. Like, for example, the grief that Thomas has brought upon John Smith and Helen Smith. It would be very easy for the viewer to just say, we've seen this, can we just move on? But the writers are deft enough that they can handle that. And it's nice to know that nothing is cheap. We have some plot contrivances, but after the plot is kicked in, the consequence, the aftermath, is never cheap. The characters are usually dealing with that in the episode after, if not for several episodes after there. So they talk about the bar mitzvah for 30 seconds. Then we get an 8-second pause. Juliana says, I wish I'd been there. And then there's an 8-second pause. 8 seconds. And then Frank says, me too. And then you were right about everything. Then 10 more seconds of silence. Amazing. That's 18 seconds. 18 seconds of letting the actors play out the scene. So here's Frank. Let's go in order. Start with Juliana. So there's Juliana. Juliana saying, I wish I'd been there. There's the clock again. There's the camera. Right there. All right, I'll figure this out. I really want to learn how to do the overlays where you can put, no, like over here. I could put an image right there. Hopefully that'll be in the future. Okay, and here's Frank. I think if I stand up. There we go. And that was really amazing. Amazing letting the actors breathe in the scene like that. I appreciated it very much. All right, after the break, we'll be talking about thoughts and themes, and then this installment for the first time talking about location. So I'll see you in a little bit. let's talk about the Grand Palace. I've mentioned before I have problems with that location. I feel that it's not suitable for what's occurring within the season. It takes too much effort on the part of the script writers to make the characters come to that location and meet at the right time. There's always a bunch of contrivance about how the characters meet there. And while it's beautiful, I just feel like it would have been better to have Sabra be the central location in the neutral zone. So I went back and I tried to find how many times have characters met in the Grand Palace based upon coincidence. And here's what I've got. I've got in episode 303, Childen meets Mark Gaston, and their talk leads to the bounty hunter going to accost Mark because they talk about Jewish mementos that Childen has been buying throughout the neutral zone. Episode 304, Yakuza enter just as Lila is there and ask about Frank. And this knowledge, when Lila reports it back to the people in Sabra, precipitates the vote that they take at the end of episode 305, the middle of episode 305. 306, Mark meets Childen and Ed. These are all coincidences. Characters just happen to be there at the right time. Episode 307, Mark sees the bounty hunters come into the bar. Of all the times they could have come into the bar, Mark Gaston's not going to be there all night. Maybe he has a window of an hour or half an hour when he's there, and the bounty hunters just happen to come in as he's there. I think it would have been better served to just not have the Grand Palace and have it just be random locations in Denver, or better yet, have the man in the High Castle's house that Juliana was in at the beginning of episode 301, 302, have that be the main location until Sabra begin to become more important when Juliana goes there. Just have her go into town and meet people. And finally, the last thing I want to cover, the title. The title of the episode was Excess Animus, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Excess Animus. That comes from the idea of animus and anima, the Jungian idea that men have a female aspect to them and women have a male aspect to them. And the men who try to repress the female aspect of them suffer from neuroticism, and the women who try to repress the male aspect of them suffer from neuroticism. And female and male under Jungian psychology mean various things. The female energy can be the creative energy, the nurturing energy. The male energy can be the energy to enact plans, drive. Let's look at this idea of animus and anima through two sets of important characters, 4 characters altogether. Let's look at Frank and Juliana and compare them to John and Helen Smith. Frank and Juliana, where do they find their opposite, what Jung called the shadow, which I think I've also mentioned before, the shadow aspect. Juliana finds her male aspect through Aikido, through the study of Aikido. And Frank finds his female energy, his female aspect through his creativity, through his art. And you can see that now that he's begun creating the posters of the sunrise, that he is much more in balance. And Juliana, now that she's out of the greater Nazi states, has also found herself. So they are, and we see them couple. They are able to take their energy and their drive and express it in a healthy way through their relationship, their connection with each other. And now let's look at John and Helen Smith. John is in a position where he cannot show any weakness, he cannot show any emotion to anyone but his family. And he has been suffering from nightmares from the actions that he's taken in the past. Helen is in a position we saw in season 2 as the trophy wife of a very powerful man. She must find fulfillment through the way that she can support her husband. And that's led to her being weak in a way that maybe that Juliana is not. I had mentioned the episode before, Juliana had suffered not a tragedy, a trauma, because she had killed Joe Blake, someone she had conflicted feelings for, very deep feelings for. And it appears after one episode that she's got a handle on that. Helen suffered the loss of Thomas at the end of season 3, and 7 episodes in, her and her husband are still dealing with the repercussions of that. Both of them had bizarre dreams, nightmare dreams, that show that they have deep repression and unsatisfied longings they are not being fulfilled within their current relationship as it is expressed. And one recurring theme throughout the season has been John Smith's impotence, whether it's through lack of desire, lack of time, or just can't get it up. We don't know. But a couple times Helen has made the overture of having a sexual relationship, resuming the sexual relationship with her husband, only to be rebuffed. It'll be interesting to see where those two sets of relationships go. My guess is that Juliana and Frank will not last, because they're now, and their arcs are in different trajectories. However, Helen and John will be together, but they've teased that Helen has begun because she's unfulfilled, begun fantasizing a sexual relationship with her psychologist. If it's transference or genuine feeling, it's not stated. I can only guess it's more from need than anything else. But I don't believe we've seen the end of that. There will be, I think, some resolution to the role the psychologist is playing within John Smith and Helen Smith's marriage. I did have one, in case you missed it, and I have just finished rewatching season 2, and at the very last episode 210, there's mention of a Lincoln Rockwell Airport in New York City. And considering that he became the big bad for the first half of season 3, it was interesting that they had kind of seeded his name within season 2. I believe most people, even if they caught that, probably forgotten about it by the time season 3, 2 years later, it rolled around. Well, that's all I have for now. Okay, I hope that life sees you well, and I hope you will join me again soon. Take care and be well. We've seen that Juliana has finally met Frank